Oh, my goodness.
I don't know if anybody wants to interview you now.
Wow.
So Congresswoman Waters, so I don't waste any of your time. People saw that clip, yes, and there were a lot of people who thought that was the first time you went gangster. You have been the same person you were on that video, yeah, for your entire political career. That's right. And so I would just like to start by saying thank you.
You're welcome.
For just being who you are in a time where so many are running afraid.
That's right. Thank you.
So as we talk about that,
yes,
Jeff Sessions,
yes,
in my estimation, is even more dangerous than the person in the White House, because he's pragmatically beginning to dismantle work that people in this room and many of those that Congressman Lewis talked about, the work that they've done, and it's immediately impacting lives.
That's right.
Can you talk a little bit about, number one, some of the most egregious areas that Sessions is attacking, and pragmatically, how do we respond to it?
Well, you're absolutely correct. Let me, first of all, thank you for being who you are. Starting as a very young person, taking the initiative, knowing that you had power and you have worked it tremendously, and I appreciate you. Please give Jeff a big round of applause. Thank you. You're absolutely right about Jeff Sessions. First of all, he's a racist. He's a throwback. He has defined himself throughout his career. And so the President of the United States appointed him to one of the most important offices in all of government, to become the Attorney General, with the power that he holds to do the damage that he set out to do. I have a session all about Jeff Sessions, and we're going to deal with his attack on mandatory minimums. We've been working hard to get justice in this system because of the mandatory minimums that have sent so many of our people to prison. Young people, small amounts of drugs, crack cocaine, who have ended up with long terms in prison. They have to increase the prison population tremendously. But he now wants to review that, and he wants to get tough and do away with the mandatory minimums relaxations that we have done. And then voting rights. You know, he said that the NAACP and the ACLU were communist organizations when they were fighting to make sure they protect the voting rights of our people. Consent decrees, this is very important. You take a look at what's happening in St. Louis right now. You take a look at all of the targeting of young black males for the most part, but black people in general, all of the lives that have been lost. The Justice Department now can move into these local police jurisdictions, take a look at their practices, and work at redoing the training, helping to identify where they have been unfair, on and on and on. When they move in and they identify bad police officers with bad records, etc., and they have to get rid of them, they work out an arrangement with that local police jurisdiction, and then they follow it for years to make sure that changes are made. Just like what happened in Ferguson when they determined that all these warrants were being issued unfairly to African Americans traveling through these little cities and towns. Well, he is saying that we should leave these local jurisdictions alone. Don't interfere with these police departments. Let them do their work. The federal government doesn't have any business being involved. And so he does not want to do consent decrees. As a matter of fact, he wants to undo them altogether. And then there's affirmative action. He is saying that white people are the victims of affirmative action. He has moved aggressively on all of these areas: mandatory minimums, voting rights, consent decrees, affirmative action. And so...
But can you talk a little bit about the affirmative action piece? Because I think people are incredibly clear on the voting rights piece, and many people that don't know dissent decrees still know that the Justice Department helped to push and support local municipalities in bringing about police reform. But many states have not dealt with ballot initiatives the way your state has, that over a period of 20 years dismantled affirmative action.
That's right.
Especially by way of education. And what has the impact of that been? Because I hear him talking about this false sense of equity and equality,
yes.
but not talking about what the impact has been in places that has gone through it.
Well,
California
you can take a look at higher education, and you can see, for example, with UCLA in California, it has been years since we've had the kind of representation of blacks coming into that institution that would make good sense for a state like California, where, you know, black kids are graduating with 3.5, 3.9, 4 but they couldn't get into UCLA. And that has happened all over the country. But let me tell you, one of the reasons we've not been able to really fight for affirmative action, too many black people were ashamed of affirmative action. And they would say to you, well, no, I got in on my own. I didn't benefit from affirmative action. I was smart enough. Well, come on, people. You know, the fact of the matter is that you have all of these legacy appointments of people who have relatives, who have management in these universities, and they get in because their parents gave money, because their parents are part of the alumni, etc. So that's real affirmative action for white people that happens in these universities. And so black people should not be ashamed of affirmative action that's trying to correct the wrongs of the past. And so it has been very harmful in all of our universities.
And so whether we're talking about Jeff Sessions around the issues of police reform, or whether we're talking about the fact that we no longer are going to have an SBA or a business focus from this White House that's trying to help develop black businesses at the local level, there's no shortage of areas that we can target.
Just take a look at his cabinet. Betsy DeVos on education. She hasn't seen the inside of a classroom. She doesn't know anything about education. And she's bringing in all of the private post-secondary schools that rip off our people every day who are trying to get an education, who may have dropped out, and they go to one of these colleges that's holding a private post-secondary colleges who are saying, come here, we can train you. You get the money from the government in order to, you know, pay their tuition, etc. And she's bringing them back in. As a matter of fact, she's bringing into her administration one of the managers of one of the big private post-secondary schools that's been a part of all the ripoff. And then look at Ben Carson. My God. My grandmother would call him an educated fool. Here's a man that has a reputation of being, you know, a very highly competent surgeon. But when he talks about poor people, he says they're the cause of their poverty. He doesn't understand why you didn't do what he did and why you didn't make it like he made it. And he doesn't know the difference between slavery and immigration. And so he's coming before my committee. If you think I took Mnuchin on, you watch what I'm going to do to Ben Carson. Let's just take a look. Look at Mnuchin over the Treasury Secretary, Betsy DeVos in education, Ben Carson over at HUD, Wilbur Ross, who's part of the Kremlin clan, and all of these people in the cabinet that he has chosen to run this country. If we're not upset, something's wrong with us.
Well, and let me stop there, because you are clearly using your job, the space that you have, to take them to task.
That's
whether
right.
it's in committee or whether it's challenging in back rooms.
That's right.
But there's a nation of people and frankly a room of people that are also trying to figure out how do they up their own game. What are recommendations? Because you've already said there's no shortage of issues. But if we're not elevating and evolving, let me be more specific. What do you say to young people who have been a part of showing up at rallies, showing up at marches, using social media, effectively using their cultural currency to lift up issues. What do you say to those that want to go to another level about how do I get involved in sustained engagement around these movements? And whether it's policy or something else, what do they do?
Well, I think there are a number of things. Most of the protests have been after killing, and our young people show up in the street, as they're doing in St. Louis now, and that peters out. I mean, it doesn't last very long. And so I think it's very important to understand how the systems work and get involved in them in different ways. For example, I know some are saying, well, I don't like the Democratic Party, I don't like the Republican Party, you're all the same. We're not the same, but they have not focused on the differences between the parties. But let's take a look at how we do not involve ourselves in Democratic Party politics or in electoral systems. First of all, you will see that many of these right-wing organizations not only are involved in raising money, but they show up also. They come to Washington, D.C., they lobby. They have lobby days, and they come and they back up their legislators. And whether it is Second Amendment rights, on the gun issue, or whether it is, dealing with choice and whether or not women should have control of their bodies, they come. And so we don't have enough people who show up at the Capitol and really organize lobby days where they go from office to office. The second thing is, don't understand enough about how to raise money and how to create PACs. These PACs are very important because they support the kind of legislators that you say you want. Most of us are out there doing what we do, and we go to various organizations, we speak at chapters of the NAACP and women's groups, etc. But when it gets down to how we get elected, the support is not really there.
But let me agree and push back a little bit, and then we're going to open the floor. Most of the people you mentioned have huge money and institutional infrastructure behind them. So when you talk about Second Amendment, NRA is putting millions of dollars behind that. When you talk about research, you've got the Cato Institute. When you talk about the Heritage Foundation and what they're doing, when you talk about having Fox News as a media infrastructure that pushes out their piece, we're infrastructure deficient. And so how do we play a better job at the money game? Because if we've got $1 trillion in spending power, but we're still talking about the organizations we don't have, there's a disconnect between the money we have and how we invest it. What are some of the ways we need to play a more sophisticated role in the money game in politics?
Well, I alluded to creating PACs. Anybody can create a PAC. Any organization can do that and collect small amounts of money. It will add up. We're not on the internet collecting and asking for the contributions in the way that we should. You have a lot of independent organizations. The Koch brothers run their own thing. I mean, they are not involved necessarily with the Republican Party. They support a lot of what they do, but they're rich, they have a lot of money, they raise money, and they use those PACs to influence and to contribute to those efforts that are important to them. And it's very important for us to start to do that. We talk about not having money, but we have plenty of money. As a matter of fact, one of the workshops that I'm going to do Friday morning is about the amount of money that hip-hop has put into this national economy. $1 trillion. When you take a look at Jay-Z and you take a look at P. Diddy and all of the branding that they have done and the money that they have raised, and you take a look at hip-hop and what we've contributed to style and to fashion, not just rap, all of that, millions, multi-millions of dollars. When are we going to decide that our politics are just as important as some of the other things that we do?
Thank you. I want to make sure we can get as many questions as we can, so please, brief questions for the Congresswoman, and we'll get to as many as we can. Yes, ma'am.
Congresswoman Maxine Waters, we're so happy to see you.
Hey!
My question is, in terms of young folk who are giving tremendous amount of money to divide the black community, how can we follow the money? Because we have a mayoral race in Durham, North Carolina with 5 black folk running for mayor and one white man.
Yep.
And the money that the other PACs is giving, they're paying black folk $5,000 in an election. How do we follow the money and get those five to come together and we decide which one is the best one out there? Coming together. That's our biggest problem with young folk now. And you know, I'm old. I'm one of the old ones.
No, you're an elder, and there's a difference.
But I tell you one thing, if we could come together, instead of, they are paying those other young folk to divide us.
Thank you. So, and we've seen it in St. Louis. We've seen it in Ferguson. We're getting ready to see it in Atlanta. And to her point, it's not, because I want to make sure we say this, it's not just about young people. There is a level of misogyny that I'm seeing where you've got men who can't win a race blocking sisters who could win if they move. And so how do we talk about not just coming together, but how do we talk about smart politics that says who is the best candidate for now, and how can Negroes that can't win be reminded they can't win to support the sister who can?
Excuse me one moment. Let me just say this. The reason we have this kind of division and competition that's not in our best interest is because our communities are not organized. And I tell you exactly what can be done. If those who claim to have influence, and this includes the ministers and the so-called community leaders, if they organize a community conference, you take all of the candidates ahead of time and you interview them and you learn about them, their backgrounds, what they care about, what they've done, what their positions are. And then you let them present themselves on a stage and you have the community come out and listen to what they're saying, and then you let that conference, you let that community say, we are going to decide to support this one person because this is the person who's aligned with our concerns, and this is the person who understands what the job is, and we're going to put the community behind this one person. But you got to organize. You've got to bring the community out to choose the person. Otherwise, everybody will choose themselves, and that's why you will have the division. Organize the communities. Ministers, you have the opportunity to talk to more people on Sunday morning in America than anybody else. And I want you to know, we're not hearing from you. No. We're not hearing from you. Where are you? You have a president who said in his campaign that you don't have anything. You get shot anytime you walk down the street. You don't have anything to lose. Talk down to you. Where is your level of insult? When are you going to come together and have to organize all of these people that are coming to church every Sunday and do the kind of community work that will select the right individuals to run for office?
Let me do this really quickly. There's no way I'm going to get to everybody in line. If we can get the next 3 questions, there will be questions in the larger panel, so there will be another opportunity. But if I can quickly get these last 3 questions. Yes, sir.
I'm Reverend Daniel Graves. I'm a community activist from Houston, Texas.
Okay.
And I kudos to you, Maxine, because I am a young minister in my neighborhood for over 15 years. I'm fighting a case with the Supreme Court right now.
Quick question.
Okay.
What I'm looking for is this. What kind of guidelines can we put in place for Supreme Court to not be able to put our put our civil rights cases in the back of the order list? What is happening?
Okay, let me. I got the question, brother. Let me get these 2 other questions, and I'll make sure she answers it. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Mildred Hodgson, and I'm the president of Central Long Island NAACP. And what I want to know is, I've been trying to encourage young people to vote for run for office for next year. What do I do to get them to run for these offices, starting with the local legislation? We do have one person that's running, but I'd like them to run for Congress, since they're going to be 435 seats next year, and we're trying to encourage them.
Yes, ma'am.
And so many of them do not want to, want to run. They're not interested, and I keep telling them, because we have people.
I got your question, ma'am. I appreciate it. Okay. It's a great question. We're going to get to it. Last question. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. I'm Councilwoman Chawna Banks from Baton Rouge. What I'd like to know is how do you deal with, not the Trumps and the Sessions, but the African-American elected officials that are our color but not our kind, who run on issues that are for disenfranchised communities, but once they're elected, they totally abandon those issues. And I'm very opinionated and I stick to those issues, but then you become disenfranchised with your colleagues. They abstain from votes. They don't get involved. They don't support you. They actually may even come against you. How do you deal with not those issues, those hood rats in our communities that don't support us?
Thank you so much for all the color commentary. 3 questions. One, how do we engage the Supreme Court in general? Because so many of us don't even engage the Supreme Court, but dealing with the order in which cases are heard. Second, are we going to develop candidate incubators at some point where we're preparing young people to run for office instead of just asking them? And then 3, how do we really hold elected officials accountable during the process, not just during the election?
Well, you know, you're going to hear over and over again about voting. And some people think, well, I vote. And everyone should understand the price that has been paid by our ancestors for voting. But we are not voting our strength. When you talk about appointments by presidents, such as appointments to the Supreme Court, the community has to show up. First of all, we should be putting forth somebody that we would like to see appointed to the Supreme Court. And we should get behind them. And we should challenge presidents, whether they are, you know, Republicans or Democrats, to talk about the kind of people that we want. We get on the radio, we get on television, we march, we organize. You don't leave it to those to do the right thing. These people are not going to do the right thing. They're going to do what is in their best interest. And it's all about voting, organizing, showing up, and working in order to have influence on elected officials and these systems that dictate everything that goes on in our country. That's number one. I believe that wanting to be an elected official is in the gut. And I believe that those who have the passion, those who believe that they can make change, those who believe that they can impact the system in some way are your best candidates. I think if you have to beg, pull, and do everything to try and get somebody to run, that may not be the right person. But I do think that those of us who are in office have to demonstrate we stand for something. This will inspire young people a lot more than thinking it's all just a bunch of people looking to do good for themselves or move up the ladder or to have opportunities for themselves. We've got to make sure that we're speaking truth to power, that we're standing up for young people, that they know that we've got their backs. When we do that, I think more will be interested. But as long as you're trying to encourage them, beg them, what have you, it doesn't really work. When you identify young people in the community who are speaking up, when you identify some of these young people in Black Lives Matter who are saying what needs to be said, then go get them and say, I see what you're saying. I see what you're doing. I think you're going to make a good elected official. Let's work with people who have the passion and who want to do it and who understand how important it is. There are plenty of them in our communities, but guess what? We don't associate with them because we think they're too controversial. Black people, you better get controversial. You'd better be controversial. You had better call it like it is. We've been shut down because others have defined us. When they said to us about 10, 15 years ago, oh, she's playing the race card, you should say, yeah, and I got a lot more I'm going to play. Don't run away from it. And that's what happened. We stopped calling a racist because they said that that's all you do. You don't do anything else. Don't let these people intimidate or scare you. You got to get in the fight. And you got to be in the fight to make some sacrifices, to understand when you're winning, to continue to work, to make things happen. And I want to tell you it is time to take off the handcuffs. It's time to get in it. It's time to call it like it is. Don't come here and tell me, Maxine, you keep on doing what you do. Maxine gonna keep on doing what you do, but when you gonna give me some support? How many of you in your organizations have said impeach 45? Oh no, don't understand that, well, they don't have what it takes. They don't have the laws yet. Impeachment is about whatever the Congress says it is. There is no law that dictates impeachment. What the Constitution says is high crimes and misdemeanors, and we define that. Bill Clinton got impeached because he lied. Here you have a president who I can tell you and guarantee you is in collusion with the Russians to undermine our democracy. Here you have a president who has obstructed justice. And here you have a president that lies every day. Thank God that the special counsel is beginning to connect the dots and understand Facebook's role in it, social media's role in it. When is the black community gonna say, yeah, impeach him? It's time to go after him. I don't hear you. Don't another person come up to me and say, you go, girl. No, you go. That's right.
And on that note, Congresswoman Waters, one of the things before you go that I vividly remember about our interaction more than anything else, I was National Youth Director for the NAACP.
Yes.
We were in LA for an event, and you were walking through the crowd, and there was a killer. And when you're from our community, you know who killers are and who they're not.
That's right.
And he was a killer. 6'8", tatted up, walking by you, said, hey, Congresswoman. And you turn around, and he said, where's my hug? And you went up to him, and you embraced him. And I mention that because leadership is not about how you act when you walk with kings. It's how you act when you're with the people and nobody else is around and there's no cameras. And that spoke to me that was 20 years ago.
Yes.
And I've never, ever forgotten it because you didn't blink an eye. He knew you.
Yes.
And you knew him.
Yes.
And it wasn't about what his title was or how many felonies he might have or was he strapped at the time. It was that he was a son of the community that you represented.
That's right.
And you embraced him like you would a president of the United, well, not this president, but a president of the United States.
That's right.
And I tell that story to say thank you for fighting for all of us.
You're so welcome.
All the time.
You're so welcome, and I want all of us to know these are our children. They belong to all of us. And one of the things I recognized during the height of crack cocaine in Los Angeles and across this country, that we had children who were literally living in crack houses. Parents had gone astray, gotten involved with drugs, being sent to prison. People, who was standing up for the children? They were dropped off of America's agenda. And so when you act like others and you get afraid because a young black man walks past you just because his pants is lower than you'd like, his cap is turned in a way that you don't like, and you want to deny them because they have decided to have symbols of defiance, to say, I know you don't like me. Take a look at me now. I don't like you either. Let's do something about that. Let's embrace them. Let's accept them. Let's talk with them. Let's invite them in. Let's understand the history of black people, where neighbors and communities have served as that village for all of our black kids. Let's get back to that, and let's do that. That's what that's all about. When you fear your own, you will never be able to talk with them. You'll never be able to connect with them.
So many people in this room and have been calling you Auntie Maxine.
Yeah.
And it is a term of endearment, but you're Queen Warrior Maxine.
Wow.
And we honor you. Ladies and gentlemen, Congresswoman Maxine Walker.
Thank you so very much. Thank you.
Let's do a selfie real quick. Because I got to.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed being with you, and I've got to go. I've got to reclaim my time. Thank you.